Hi, I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and welcome to this video. So in this one, I'm just going to kind of get on my soapbox, give some commentary about current events and about one of the most celebrated periods in American history, one that is still widely celebrated to this day, and this is World War II. And I don't have a great opinion of World War II, especially for what it did to the country afterward. So some people may be offended by this. If you follow this channel and it offends you, well, you know I definitely don't care. And if you're new to the channel and you're offended, now you know I definitely don't care. So yeah, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. Before I get into it, thank you to everybody who watches the videos, likes, subscribes, shares, comments. All that stuff helps the algorithm, helps the channel out a lot. So, greatly appreciated. So let's get into this topic. So, as you've seen in the title, I mentioned how I think World War II destroyed America. And I think this because, you know, for the past, 76, we're going on 77 years, better 75 years and some change. As Americans, we've really been in a severe state of brattishness. And this brattishness was catalyzed by the aftermath of World War II. And this was all cooked up and sown by mainstream media. Now, mainstream media, some people get it in their heads that mainstream media is this platform where all of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world show up and make appearances so that they can tell people the truth about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's hard to get much more arrogant than that if you think that the most powerful people in the world just spill their guts and tell you what they're up to. So that's highly narcissistic, and it's based on an assumption of your own importance, which, if you have this view, you really need to re-examine, because everything going on in the world right now is just, it's going right over your head. So, and I'm not saying this to make fun of you or make fun of anyone. I want to help people. I actually do care, but I get irritated. Let's be honest. If you've watched me before, you know I get irritated. So, or if you know me. Yeah. So mainstream media helped encourage people to adopt this brattishness. And the thing about mainstream media is that they make money off of ratings. They make money off of being popular, whether you're talking about TV shows, movies, whatever. Sponsors with big money, corporate sponsors, want to sponsor shows and news programs and networks that have wide followings, because you can get your products out there in front of a lot of people and they're going to flock to them. So the corporate sponsors make the news, and they make the movies, they make the TV shows, they write the newspapers, they do all of it. It's all about sponsorship. It's not about telling you the truth because you're so important, because you went to college, you own a business, you own a house, you own real estate, you were in the military. Nobody cares. And they especially don't care if your mommy, daddy, grandma, grandpa fought in World War II. They don't care. They don't owe you the truth. So, and this is at the heart of this topic. The World War, and what I find is that, the World War II generation they really took that whole war in stride. And, when they got praise about it, they were like, well, we just, it was a shitty situation. We just did what we had to do, and, it is what it is. And then the funny thing is that the children, and in some cases grandchildren, but especially the children of the World War II generation, are just as arrogant as you can imagine about their parents being World War II veterans. And then when you take it another step, the baby boom, the children of the World War II generation, they can be extremely arrogant about the whole thing because people their parents' age fought in World War II. That's pretty nutty when you think about that. It's like, do you have an identity? Other than like cheerleading a war that was over when you were like a toddler or before you were even born. So a lot of weirdness here. Mainstream media really like instilled this ownership of the victory in people who weren't even part of it, who were not even born or not even old enough to be there. And it created a lot of weird self-loathing in people who were too young to have ever been part of it. Really bizarre. But this media giving people this false ownership of the so-called victory basically encouraged people to have an arrogant attitude. So during the Cold War, from 1947 onward especially, with the establishment of CIA, which wasn't established to keep the American people safe, but it was there to protect the supremacy of the Bretton Woods Agreement, which guaranteed the supremacy of the US dollar. So Bretton Woods Agreement, 1944, before the war ended, the bankers got together in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and they decided that US dollar would be the top currency and everybody had to conduct international trade in it. So that's how all this prosperity at the end of the 1950s just exploded. So it wasn't because we won and we were so awesome, it was a financial game. So during that time period, Americans were encouraged to think that we could do no wrong. The rules of history didn't apply to us when it came to imperialism and things like that. When it came to the national security state going bad and being used by tyrants. It's called American Exceptionalism. And, we thought that acting like an empire wasn't really imperialistic because we're the good guys and we would never do that. Extremely narcissistic, extremely arrogant. And we also became brats at home. We took on a real entitled mentality that everything should just always be under our control, under minute control. And people started getting into this mentality of the risk-free life where nothing should ever, threaten your safety or, or whatnot. And then people really got into conformity too, and they really just were taught to have contempt for people who didn't color inside the lines and fit in the little box. So a lot of weird social things happen. And then too, when you look at the history of it, it's like Soviet Union and China really fought about 95% of the war. And America and Britain just basically grabbed the football at the 2-yard line and ran it into the end zone. Whereas the Chinese and the Soviets got it all the way downfield, that whole 98 yards. So, and the way I see it too is Germany was destroyed. The Nazis won because they got to come to America, they got to go to the Soviet Union and get really important jobs, influential jobs, positions of influence. And the Allies just had to declare victory out of embarrassment. And the Nazis created a stalemate, which was the Cold War. They actually split the rocket technology and the rocket scientists, sent half to the West, half to the Soviet Union. You had a perfect stalemate. So yeah, it was, it's a hell of a mess, and we're still dealing with it. And so, another thing too, with all this kind of World War II propaganda and hype, and just thinking that we're masters of the world and we should just live in absolute comfort all the time and have no risks and no threats, to our health, to our livelihoods, to our country. And so, in the middle of all that propaganda and that arrogance and narcissism that the propaganda was encouraging, people basically got this, they were fed this idea that, you know, America was so wholesome, and you know, everything's transparent. Corruption is not rampant. Corruption is not predominant. People were fed all this shit, and they're basically, there was like a cleaning of the mental slate. So everything before 1945 didn't really exist. Now, with all this said, America's a great country. We're the last fortress right now against this whole totalitarian takeover that's being led by the drug manufacturers right now and their little puppets in government. So it's a great country, but it can always use improvement. Everybody can always use improvement. We're never done growing, we're never done maturing. So our country's the same way. So yeah, this false idea of wholesomeness, especially during the 1950s, just with the really syrupy movies and TV shows, you know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart. We were fed this very unreal sense of wholesomeness. So you carry that forward to right now, you've got so many people who have thought that deep state is a total tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. A lot of people have changed their tone about that, but a lot of people are like, there's no deep state because we won World War II and we defeated fascists. And it's like, well, the fascists here in America on Wall Street were lending the money to the fascists in Europe so they could run a government and fight a war. So it was here the whole time. So as more and more people wake up to this deep state thing and they realize that the wholesome goody-goody America thing was media fiction, they're having to come to terms with this whole reality of what's going on right now. With, you know, the drug companies have hijacked the advisory boards like World Health Organizations and CDC that just give advice, and now these advisory boards are giving mandates that government is backing up even though the whole thing's totally illegal. And so through this wake up and all these realizations, people are saying to themselves, how did this happen? How did this ever happen? How did it get this way? Well, that's where the hangover part comes in, because this deep state always existed. All this shit was always around and always like this. But we were in complete denial of it, or we were just blissfully ignorant of it. So I always call World War II, the so-called victory of World War II, I call it the 1945 party. The 1945 party lasted until 2020. And we're in the hangover. You know, in the hangover, the World War II party and the hangover, the 1945 party and the hangover, they're on dimmer switches. So the 1945 party, the World War II wholesome, you know, arrogance started dimming down after 9/11, because it was like, well, here's your national security state at work, you know, imploding skyscrapers. And that started dimming down, and the hangover, dealing with the reality of things, started dimming up. So in 2020, really the World War II party, the 1945 party, was pretty close to fully dimmed down, and the hangover dimmed way the fuck up. You know, rotating that dimmer switch clockwise, brightening that light. So it's like the bright light in the morning when you're hungover. So that's what we're dealing with right now, and the whole point is that it was always this way. People just didn't want to admit it. People were fucking delusional because they were like, oh, we won World War II and we destroyed evil and fascism forever. It's like, you gotta be giving me a fucking break. So, you know, the fascists on Wall Street even funded communism. So you're even wasting your time going out and fighting commies if you're not looking at the financiers that fund all sides of everything. So yeah, we have a hangover to deal with. The world has always been this way. We just didn't want to admit to it because people were like, my America is not that way. Well, you know what? Get back. They were all drunk, high, and stoned through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So they weren't really paying attention to much. in all fairness. So saying you're America is not such a way. It's like, well, how would you know? Because there was a drug and alcohol cloud for like half the 60s and in the next 2 decades. So yeah, we're having to come to terms with reality, and it feels like a hangover. But you can't party forever. You can't stay drunk and high forever. You have to come down, and you have to deal with the self-inflicted abuse that you've been dealing to yourself, or your country, as it were. So that's pretty much my take on that. I'm under 20 minutes. That's good. I'll wrap it up there, but thanks for tuning in. Hope you got something out of my rant. New perspective, at least. And I thank you all. If you've not had a reading with me, I highly recommend it. It's a great way to take another look at yourself, to really embrace things that you intuitively knew about yourself, but weren't quite ready to run with. You know, a lot of time you know something intuitively, but your conscious, logical mind is not really ready to, get up and go with it and take it to heart. And so when you get one of these readings, basically, whether I'm reading runes, whether I'm doing an astrology reading, I'm looking at the hologram. We live in a hologram. Our 3D, the natural 3D matrix that we live in is a hologram. So I'm looking at the hologram and reading the messages in it. So when your conscious mind sees that, and it recognizes I'm telling you something that you intuitively knew about yourself, your logical mind kind of goes, whoa, okay, I can get behind that. That's really the whole purpose to it. And it's a good roadmap and a good way to strategize your life. Good roadmap for life, good way to help you strategize for it. And I've got some instructional videos on sale for download. Qigong. Qigong's an awesome mind-body practice that's been life-changing for me. And it optimizes physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So thanks again, and you'll be hearing from me later. Have a good one.